Hello, flat earth researchers, debaters and debunkers. There's no universal consensus on the cosmos. It's something that has been studied and recorded for millennia. The Vedics were possibly the first to do it, and they have their models. So do the Hindus. There are many different models compared to the heliocentric model, which, if you're living in the West, say Europe or the US or somewhere like that, you probably believe that the entire rest of the world and the entire scientific community adheres to this heliocentric model that was dreamed up by Copernicus a few hundred years ago, based on a whole bunch of assumptions. In my mind, the heliocentric model was brought out into the public domain about the same time as a drive to switch to a solar calendar, namely the Gregorian calendar. So with the sun now at the center of this calendar, instead of what was previously a lunar calendar, which still ends up giving you the same seasons and the same annual cycles, just with a focus on the moon rather than the sun, then we have this necessity to justify or illustrate how it's possible to have day and night on the Earth if the sun is not moving and it's at the center of our solar system or heliocentric model. Well, of course, you have to have the Earth rotating, but it also has to be a sphere. So there was this assumption made that the Earth is another planet and is just going around the sun along with the other planets that we see in the sky. Whereas all the other ancient cosmology puts all the luminaries, the sun and the moon and the stars, above a level plane and inside a universe that has many layers to it. And ultimately, what we are looking at with the Vedic or Hindu illustrations or their versions of cosmology is the same movement of the stars. For example, in this Vedic model, we see chariots representing the sun and the moon. And what this means is, because if we look at the sun and the moon from either south or north of the equator, we'll see the sun and moon appear to roll across the sky in exactly the same fashion with the same rotation for both bodies depending on which location you're in. I observed this myself by observing the moon, which from the UK appears to rotate as it arcs across the sky. It doesn't go overhead. It goes overhead at the equator above me here in Phuket, and so does the sun. So we see this kind of flip as the sun and moon go overhead. But in the northern so-called hemisphere, we see both the sun and the moon appear to rotate in a kind of clockwise direction as they go across the sky. So we can observe this with the sun by looking at sunspots on the sun, and then as you watch them throughout the day, they will appear to rotate like the hands on a clock. So when we see the chariots in the Vedic model here representing the sun and the moon, they are just representing that rolling that we see as they go across the sky, depending on our perspective from a level plane. Of course, none of these descriptions or illustrations were arrived at by actually going out there, but they were perceived from our earthbound observations. And so what we also have in the Hindu, the Vedic or the Buddhist interpretations or illustration of the cosmos is us on this earth, our physical realm, a level plane, possibly an island among many others, or a place that is divided by very high, impassable mountains. And these models combine what we observe as well as the kind of spiritual steps that we are taking as incarnations of consciousness. And so where we are right now is just considered as a time and a place for us to be having a certain experience on a path that our individual consciousness is taking as part of a larger consciousness. So ultimately, whatever illustrations or descriptions are used to represent the cosmos in Vedic or Hindu cosmology, we also have places such as Angkor Wat, which appears to represent the cosmos, the layout, a blueprint, as it were, of the cosmos. Again, with this intermingling of the metaphysical, more spiritual aspect of our life experience and consciousness. So all of these models are very different, and they each have their own unique characteristics, but essentially whatever gods or deities they want to use to try and illustrate this idea or perception of the universe, it's all about consciousness and the universe basically being born out of consciousness and the spreading of light. So okay, we in the heliocentric so-called science of the Western cosmology, or the modern Western cosmology, we have an explosion, a big bang from nothingness for no reason. And we have this idea that the physical universe somehow formed out of nothing for no reason. And eventually life developed, again, with no real particular reason or purpose, until at some point we must have become conscious beings. But if we look around and we use our real life experience, which is on the face of it a very esoterical thing, what we see and experience is consciousness, and that become thoughts and energy that we manifest in this physical realm. Everything that we have comes from what is materially nothing, but that immaterial thing is consciousness. So there is intelligence, there is consciousness playing a role and manifesting this reality. So we look around and everything, every living being, every animal, every creature is sentient. And we can also include plants and trees, and the earth herself is alive or is born out of consciousness or intelligence. Doesn't matter whether it's 1 million or 1 billion or 1 billion years old, or whether we even consider that evolution is a part of it. We have no idea where we are on this evolutionary scale. And we have no real idea where we are in the universe. But what we can know and experience from our life and existence is that everything we have, everything that occurred, the reality that we live in, comes from our consciousness. And for the Vedics, their vision of the cosmos was arrived at through meditation, as well as, of course, looking up at astronomy. But it's understood that it's all about time. And we have to have time. This physical realm of time is something that is necessary to have this physical experience. Time and movement is life, is the essence of life. When there is no movement, there is stagnation, and there is death and nothingness, darkness. So it doesn't matter which cosmology you would like to believe in or envisage as so-called reality. There's this understanding, especially among Buddhists, that all of those other realms are beyond our experience here and now. But there is also no attempt to try to say how it all works or what happens to us when we die. But there's an understanding that we are part of this universal consciousness, intelligence that is divine and is at the center of it all, but not with any sense of judgment like the kind of God we might be given in the West, or the idea of heaven and hell. These all manifest in the physical realm that we are on, and it is beyond our true understanding. So in comparison with the so-called heliocentric model, what we have is a cosmology of emptiness, a cosmology of dead rocks floating in space, a desire to seek life elsewhere. But at the same time, we're being told that there is no purpose, there is no meaning to the cosmology that we have. That's no different to the ancient Vedics from thousands of years ago. Nothing has changed in terms of what we see going on in the sky. But what has changed with the heliocentric model is a standardization of time, something that we're all supposed to fit in with and go along with, but has no real meaning apart from time. And again, when it comes to the scientific explanations of gravity to hold us onto an imaginary spherical Earth, this is all based on time. The whole idea of gravity is nothing more than a measure of time. That's the connection that is made. The time that something takes to fall on Earth is connected to the time it takes the moon to rotate or other planets to do their orbits. Nothing's changed in those thousands of years about what we see in the sky. Nothing has changed about the ability to predict it. So the heliocentric model didn't come along and suddenly allow people to make predictions. The heliocentric model was made and created because of thousands of years of record keeping and predictions that were accessible to these mathematicians that didn't discover anything new. They just used existing cosmology to create a different model, a different interpretation. As I said, to me it appears to have been based on the Gregorian calendar. And at the same time that we have the Gregorian calendar coming out and the heliocentric model being pushed, we have advancements in printing And so we can see just how easily consensus was reached, or maybe it wasn't easy in those days. Maybe it was tough to, maybe it had to be some real push to get everyone believing or going along with this heliocentric model. We don't know, we weren't there. Now to us it's just a blip on the linear history that we are taught. But it could have taken decades or generations to persuade the modern world to adopt the heliocentric model. But so that was, consensus was manufactured from a desire to have a timekeeping mechanism for the entire world, or the commercial world that was coming forth at that time. So when we're arguing about models, we are arguing about something that no one can ever prove, but can only ever refer to observations from this earth. But the thing is, the heliocentric model gives nothing to us, nothing to aspire to, nothing to aim for, no purpose, no direction. We become lost in the void. And we can see in the past year or so just how easy it is with mass media to create and manufacture consensus and keep a certain narrative alive while suppressing others. It's that easy to change people's minds and change entire cultures, entire belief systems, just through repetition, saturation. Of course, the one thing all of these other Vedic and Hindu models have in common is a level earth that is just one piece among many other places, many other planes of existence, and many other levels. So it's considered that it's like a game. We have to go through this stage that we're going through now to get to another stage. And so these gods and angels, or whatever you want to call them, they represent levels of achievement, as it were, in consciousness. So maybe the universe is simply consciousness having an experience, and when we take up this life in a physical realm, we are playing a role in a certain game at a certain stage, and there is an aim to go to another level of consciousness, another level that is just beyond what we can see or experience here. And it's beyond explanation, really. It's beyond anything that we can ever reach until we leave this place. Again, I'm not saying that this is the truth. I'm saying that all the other cosmologies bring in both. They bring in the observations that we make, the time and space, and the universe, as far as we can tell, exists, and they bring in the consciousness aspect of it. In fact, with the flip of an understanding that the universe is born out of consciousness, rather than the other way around with the heliocentric model and the idea of evolution that has come about for no particular reason. That's really essentially all we're looking at. The only difference, really, in the heliocentric model compared to all the other models is that the heliocentric model is literally dead. It is void of any meaning, any purpose, or any reason for it to be here in the first place. Whereas all the other cosmologies have us being here because consciousness came first and manifested all of this and much, much more than any of us can ever really truly comprehend. Thank you very much.
Click subscribe and the bell icon if you'd like to receive notifications of new videos from Phuket Word.